Welcome back, and that's the scene at the moment following an earthquake of a magnitude 5.8 earlier today, centered in northwest of Richmond, Virginia, but it shook much of Washington, D.C., was felt as far north as Rhode Island, New York City, even Martha's Vineyard, where the president is currently on vacation. At the moment, a number of buildings have been evacuated in the D.C. area. We have few reports of specific damage apart from the National Cathedral in Washington, where my colleague Luke Russett is there now. And Luke, what do you know? What can you tell us about the National Cathedral?
Well, Martin, the National Cathedral sits on the highest point in Washington, D.C., Mount Auburn. And this is a structure that's made of stone. It was made by stonemasons. It took about 100 years to build. And in the center tower, which is the oldest tower, which is called the Gloria in Excelsis Deo Tower, 3 of the pinnacles at the very top of it collapsed. 2 of them partially, 1 completely. 1 was able to remain intact. And while this might not, if you're a common viewer thinking, well, that's not a lot of damage, for this specific type of structure, it's significant because a lot of this work was all hand done. This work was, I spoke to one person who worked at the cathedral, believed to be over at least 50 to 75 years old. And it will take a long time to replace, but not necessarily the time. It will take a lot of money in terms of getting it back up to speed. This cathedral is known often as the nation's church. It is where there was a service right after 9/11. Oftentimes, presidents have their funeral services there. Gerald Ford and Ronald Reagan did so. They are actually preparing today for an upcoming 10-year anniversary of 9/11, as well as a service for the Martin Luther King unveiling of that statue near the mall. Nobody was hurt inside, but they were quite shaken up. And they actually said we were quite lucky because oftentimes there are tourists in front of the south entrance of the St. Peter and Paul Tower. Those were actually just renovated in the last 15 years, and there had been a falling pinnacle of that area. There could have been some major catastrophe, but because it was in the back, it was in the middle, it kind of fell off, went to the side. They said there are some cracks in a few buttresses in the back of the building, but overall it is structurally sound. But they're now having literally stonemasons having to go through the building almost stone by stone to make sure that the foundation is intact and secure. But those 3 pinnacles, that's a lot of stone, Martin. I tried to ask how many tons they thought it was. It looks small on TV from the viewpoint, but if you're actually up near that tower, and I've been up there when I went to high school in the area, you can actually know that that's a large structure, especially those pinnacles. So that's going to take quite a lot of resources to get back up.
And Luke, when you describe them, the word you're using, pentacles, is that right?
Pentacles, yes. That's what it's described to me, yes. And
just be specific. What does that mean to the ordinary viewer?
If you were to look at a church and you think of a sort of steeple, if you will, it's really like the top of the steeple. But the way in which the cathedral is built, it's all done with stone. So it's this beautiful masonry. It's almost an artistic creation that took years and years to do by hand. So for those to fall, it's going to be a costly rebuild, if you will.
Luke Russett, outside the National Cathedral in Washington, thank you very much indeed for your reporting.
Thank you, Martin.
And we begin this hour with the story that has everyone talking. An earthquake felt up and down the east coast, as far south as Atlanta, even as far north as Toronto, Canada. New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg expected to speak at any moment.